do my Montessori clap.
Oh,
No, just kidding. You can next time you can have like a little.
alrighty, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to move into forgiveness. And both forgiveness and reconciliation are very linked, but they're not the same thing. And the purpose of doing this, especially we're talking about the church setting, would be to preserving crucial relationships. The goal would be an improved outcome, even if we can't get full reconciliation, but it requires an open heart and an open mind to make any progress whatsoever. We're going to look at some iconic stories, and then we're going to look at some 4 different kinds of motivation. So, stories. We're going to look at a famous story from World War II, famous story in South Africa, and then one in the tech sector. So, anybody in this room, did you see the movie Railway Man? The Railway Man? Great movie based on a true story. Eric Lomax was arrested, captured, and this is tied to a famous movie called The Bridge Over River Kwai, same area, where soldiers are building bridges. They're rough, brutally treated. Lomax actually was able to sneak a radio in um, into the prison, and he was doing some sneaky things. He got caught, and he was beat over one of his wrists really, really strong by Nagase Takeshi. And so they ended up meeting in 1993 when Lomax's wife saw how miserable of a husband he was, how miserable of a man he was. He was suffering from his treatment from World War II. And she arranged a meeting, multiple meetings actually. And this movie came out in 2013. Very, very good movie. And this is a scene that might be hard to hear, but I'll give you the gist afterwards.
May I touch your hand?
Oh, yes.
No, I mean, when you are tortured, being tortured, I measure your pulse.
Yes.
And
Yes.
your heartbeat is very smooth. Yes. So I am very much relaxed.
So these are the broken bones are.
Yes, I remember.
Yes.
Very sorry. Very sorry for you.
Well, we both survived.
As a member of the Japanese army, we treated your countrymen very, very badly and against the humanity.
Yes.
I realized that. So when I repatriated from here to country, and I got various sufferings in my heart and mind. But I tried. And whenever I think of you, why you are born in this world? What purpose?
Yes.
For what purpose
It's
you are born?
a difficult question to answer. Yes.
I'm very, very sorry.
Well, thank you very much. So, a little bit more backstory. Nikishi was an employee. I think he ran the kind of a museum telling the story for the rest of his life. He worked uh, to make sure that people understood what had happened against the Americans. So he was living in the pain forever. The fact that he wrote about it is how Lomax's wife was able to find him. And so he had written a book. And so anyway, that was like the second meeting that they had. They're both have since passed away, but very compelling little snippet that shows the humanity, the feeling. For what purpose were you born? He's asking. I don't know if you heard that. So that's a really great story. This is from Nelson Mandela. We especially need to forgive each other because when you intend to forgive, you heal part of the pain. But when you forgive, you heal completely. I don't remember how many years he was in prison. I think it was a little over 30. But to see these two men side by side, and it hasn't gone easy in South Africa since then. It's just the first of many steps that that nation has needed and will continue to need in its history. But it's a great symbol. Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt were not yet quite rivals. Eric Schmidt was with Google, and we know Steve Jobs with Apple. Eric Schmidt was on the board of Apple. Well, he was on the board of Apple when Apple was planning the iPhone. So he's a spy now because he's going to do the Android thing. And he betrayed Jobs and then later admitted it. And this is a meeting with them at a coffee place talking a few years later. That was about 3 years later, reconciling and so forth. So there's all sorts of spheres in society where this material that we're talking about is relevant. It's not just church, it's not just family, it's not just the workplace, it's national, it's historical, old events. Trish and I went to Europe in 2010 and we went to Zurich. Zurich was the place that the Anabaptists were first murdered in 1526, I believe, about 7 years into the Reformation. In Zurich, Philip Mance was drowned in the river there. Like, so you believe in baptism, we're going to baptize you. And for 150 years, the Amish, the Mennonites, and also Hutterites, and all these groups were mistreated starting at there. But in 2004, the Church of Zurich offered a public apology, state church, and invited people, the descendants and representatives, to come and have communion with them. It was a very meaningful story. We learned of it while we were there. So we can reconcile things that happened before we were even alive, you know. Forgiveness is to pardon, to give complete without reservation. It's basically, you know, letting go, and that's easier said than done, we know. Robert Enright in The Forgiving Life says, to forgive is to know that you have been treated unjustly, and despite the injustice, make the decision to reduce your resentment towards the offending person, eventually work towards mercy. That mercy can take the form of kindness, respect, generosity, and even love. Do you want these in your life? Forgiveness can help strengthen them in your heart and even help them grow again for you. There's 4 different reasons that can become motivations for forgiveness. One is therapeutic for me, relationship because of us, it's because of society, it's empathetic, that could have happened to anybody. Transformative, this is where there's an unexpected benefit or development because this bad thing happened. And so, therapeutic model from Fred Luskin, Dr. Fred Luskin, is to choose to free yourself as the victim, to stop blaming, stop going in the past, stop letting the hurt continue to hurt you. This is about helping yourself move on. So overall, the goal is the victim's well-being. So Eva Mose Core was one of the 2 girls on the very front row, twins, that were experimented on by Dr. Joseph Mengele in prison. Both of them were experimented on. The experiments are different with twins. They say, like, they try something on one of the twins that they don't try with the other. Her sister ended up dying in the 1960s. Miss Core, she passed away sometime in the last 5 years. She had a Holocaust museum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But she actually went on a tour forgiving Dr. Mengele. And that upset a lot of Holocaust survivors, understandably. But she was trying to teach, I don't forgive him for you. I don't forgive him for God. He'll have to answer to God. Of course, he's been long dead. But I have to let this go from me. I have to have a life. And so she modeled that, but it can be confusing because it doesn't mean that there won't be repercussions. It just means, as far as I'm concerned, that chapter is behind me. And then she ended up meeting with the prison guard and forgiving him because he was still alive. But he did a lot of things to try to protect these kids back in the day, and she acknowledged that. So there's a really powerful emotional stories. I'm even emotional as I even think about this kind of stuff. that this is something Christians ought to be the best at. And it's not that way. I don't think it's that way in the Christian world. We're looking at social media and the news and stuff. We're like, what in the world are we doing? You know? The next one for us, the victim faces the traumatic events for what they were, forgives the slings and arrows of the wrongdoer, and if necessary, forgives self and any others. It is not an attempt to back the clock as if the situation hasn't happened, but the conflict is resolved. Overall, restoring the relationship. And this model is used nationally. It's used in some tribal wars in Africa. It's like there was connection. Maybe our families were related, our tribes were related. We separated, we went to war, we killed spouses. But now we have to say we got to start over. We have to find a reason to forgive, and even a possible future relationship where we're sharing the same fields for agriculture and so on and so forth. So for society, the self-aware victim sees the enemy as broken. He or she is empathetic. I did not walk in their shoes. The forgiver works towards societal redemption improvement to avoid repeating the offense. Hey, I have regrets in life. He's repented. He's suffered. You know, it's a book that came out this year, actually maybe at the end of last year. It's called Calling In. It's the idea, instead of calling people out, let's call them in with the purpose of understanding why we have differences and looking for a way to build a bridge. The author had been raped as a child, like 12 years old, ended up having a baby from this relative that raped her. And she became part of a rape crisis endeavor. Mad, angry person. Spent a lot of time calling people out. An activist, very intense activist. So the group that she's part of got a call from rapist in prison, wanted to meet with somebody from this group. And they're like, ain't no way we're going to go talk to them. But it bugged her. So after a number of months, she decided to take them up on it. She went to meet with them. And they said, we've raped in society and we've raped in prison. And we want to launch we're never getting out, an endeavor where we're former rapists and trying to get other men to be former rapists with us. And she ended up meeting with them many, many times, you know. So there is to think about society, to think about, I didn't walk in their shoes, how they got to where they are. It's not justification. It's just, let's think about this from another angle other than just being mad all the time. And then the transformative model is first illustrated in the biblical story of Joseph and his family. It's known as the redemptive model as well. The overall outcome of the original breach and the wrongdoings gave the parties an unexpected benefit. We can see the benefit in the long run in the story in Egypt with Joseph and his brothers. They did have a reconciliation. Very powerful one after the father died. These guys still thought Joseph would be mad at them and get revenge. And he goes, what you guys did, God meant it for good. So that's a powerful model. The praising forgiveness. There's 3 different metrics we can see where we're at. Do we wish well or harm? Do we expect or waive reparations? And do we have hope for a future or not? So now what people have trouble understanding is God wishes harm on people sometimes, okay? Especially enemies of what he's doing on earth and all that. But there is an emotional aspect to what happens when a breach has happened. We can be all over the place in what we want on these things. We want reparations. Do we want them to do well? Do we ever want a relationship with them again? I put these things up not to justify, but to say these are things we have to get in touch with, to say when we're dealing with a relationship where we're the hurt one, we have to ask ourselves, what is it we're looking for? How do we see it long term? In defining reconciliation, it's about bringing together again. Okay, that's different. You can forgive and say, I don't want that relationship anymore. There's too many triggers there still, but I do wish you well, you know, and I want great things to happen for you. And if we see each other at a church conference, yeah, I'll embrace you, and you know, you're my brother and sister in Christ or whatever. But I need to go on a new path. Okay, Reconciliation is different than that. And so it's the idea of coming together, changing of not only enmity with the forgiveness and stuff, but also to becoming friends again or getting to the right relationship. One of the things that I've realized is that some situations where people get into conflict, they should have never been in that situation. So, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a church leader who's kind of derelict and mean spirited, but he wasn't that way before he became a minister. And then he wasn't that way after he stopped being a minister. He probably should have never been a minister. Okay, so the goal in reconciling is not to get everybody back to the same situation where bad things happened. It's to recover some sense of a relationship, but the relationship recovery might look very different and even a lot better than it looked before. Okay, so to bring together again in friendly standing for an improved future. So here's the weakest version of this. Okay, that's where you agree to disagree, mutually affirm some of the lessons learned, and are willing to reestablish ground rules for a cordial relationship. Okay, that's not ideal, but the church is a whole lot better if this happens versus nothing. Like, it's not fun to be in the same room where there's two Christians that can't stand each other, and they sit on the other sides of the room. This is weak, but it's better than nothing. Okay, transitive. The issues are resolved, but the consequences have been so life-altering that rebuilding of trust and healing may take time. So, hey, we see it the same way. We know what happened. It was wrong. We can catch our breath, but hey, I don't think we're going to go on family vacations with each other for a while. We just kind of got to take some time to heal. We'll just see where this goes. And then a realignment. One or both parties may realize that their earlier relationship was not ideal or healthy, and that a newly defined relationship is better for both parties. And that's kind of like I mentioned, you have somebody that shouldn't have been over the other person, and the abuse had a power differential. And so you can say, like, what kind of relationship are we going to have right now? And having been a Christian for a long time, I've seen people being over, under, sideways with each other, different roles and authority levels and stuff, switch up so often. Like, what is the best way to live, regardless of what your title or role is in the church? It should be consistent, right? We're going to respect and so forth. So power differentials are where you see the need for realignment the most. Full. This is understanding, forgiveness, and obvious signs of healing have taken place. The original situation may not be recoverable because one of the parties may have moved across the country, reestablished a new life somewhere else, but the relationship is fully restored. That they could go on vacation together. It's like they're good. They're good. And they tell the same story about what had happened that the other party tells in their absence. Like they see it, they're open about it, they're real, and it's a done deal. And this is like pretty cool, okay? But the most transformative one is similar to the full relationship, but the relationship lands in a better place than ever before because of new learning, because of new levels of self-awareness. In religious circles, this is called redemptive. This is like, man, that was awful. But wow, did I learn some things about myself and what I want to do with the rest of my life and how I want to help other people not make the same poor choices that I made. And I think, me and Joe, you and I are better off now than we were before, with each other and blessing the kingdom of God. So this is, pretty powerful. And I've actually seen some people where that's happened, and they'll joke about their previous situation with that levity that comes from healing and time, and so forth. So I did some reconciliation situations. I mentioned the one in Hawaii in 2012. We had what we called a night of atonement there. And then one in 2018, we did Day of Atonement. This was a church service. And I spoke out of Joshua 22, where there's the river, and the 2.5 tribes are on one side, the other 10.5 are on the other. They almost went to war. It was a close call. Both sides were right, both sides were wrong. There was a triggering event, poor communication. The last minute, somebody was curious, started asking questions, gave the space to explain why the 2.5 tribes built an altar meant to communicate, we're with you guys, we're in the same religion. But it looked like we're starting our own thing, you know. And so communication becomes a big part of that story. So this ministry had undergone so many things, and some of the perpetrators of some bad stuff were no longer even in the churches. And so but it was like a war that went on for a little more than 2 years. I came in 2018, interviewed 110 people. I had a great team. I mean, really seasoned people have been around churches for years, and we led a day of atonement after some mediations where the brothers stood up before the church and specifically owned what they did. And the great thing about Hawaii, and in this example, is what their scripted apology was and what they delivered once they saw people was, it was actually better than what they wrote down they were going to say. We wanted to see what they were going to say to make sure we weren't going to go off script, you know, and be something that we'd regret. But they actually did much better. And it was so healing. And we had a 1-pager of 14 lessons learned that they developed, verses that they did not honor previously. And from this point forward, it was called a memorandum. And so that we circulated it on that Sunday, and it became a turning point. And then we developed a whole new leadership team, and then they hired some really great ministry people, and the rest is history. So the Bible works, basically. It's just biblical stuff, you know. When you do biblical things happen, you know. So anyway, that was that. There's a book that I came across in a used bookstore. Reconciliation stories are always works in progress. We often achieve one level of reconciliation, figuring out how to have a limited social relationship. For instance, only to have things shift later, enabling a deeper connection. We really only need to be good enough. We don't have to be great. If we're good enough and we're authentic and coming into situations that we have to resolve, we've got to conduct ourselves in a way that it can get better, as opposed to having such high expectations that we can't live up to. Some of my best mediations, and I probably only have done about 50 in my lifetime, but some of my best mediations were when I said, hey, the goal here is just to get a better understanding. Let's chill out, you know, and let's grow from this experience. Just keep it really relaxed, and let's go grab a bite, all of us together afterwards. And then what happens is people feel safer and freer, more vulnerable, more open, more contributing to what has happened. And then you go, wow, that was it. It happened. It didn't need a second and third meeting, you know. So lower the expectations of what we need from somebody who's hurt us. Just look for improvement at first. Look for the best that we can get out of ourselves and out of them for the moment. More better may come later. And so, but the reason I mentioned that I got this book in the bookstore is there's a sad aspect to it that motivates me. In the front cover, a father had written this book to his daughter. And basically to the effect of, I know we haven't talked for many, many years. And I thought this book could be a starting place for a conversation. And based on when the date was at the top and when I got it in a used bookstore, it seemed like this book got in a used bookstore really quick. So it probably wasn't used, and it probably wasn't the bridge. But the idea is good. And the author's definition of an evolving reconciliation process is good. So let's get better and better. How about that? Okay, great. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
You made mention about being reconciled. How do you break down those walls with years of conflict? And one party may not even remember. The other party is
I mean, I have one in my mind where I see it like that right now. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for the reminder. What do you do with one party can't even remember so many things? And it's been many years have passed, and the other party is like deeply rooted in their memory and their version of what happened and has some intense explanations. What I have done in the past, and that's a great question, is I've coached both. I've coached the person who doesn't remember to take some time to think about that period to see if they can't remember more because they might be subconsciously intending on not remembering. They don't want to go there. And sometimes it's malpractice to have a mediation when the party's not ready. I had a professor tell me that. I described a situation that was going to be so bad, but I felt the ethical obligation to try. And he says, sometimes, Steve, the best things normally are malpractice, you know. And so if you can't get somebody in a place that they're willing to participate in a free flowing discussion, that's just not going to happen. And the wronged party is just going to have to realize there's something wrong with that individual if they won't come to play. Now, if they will come to play, but they still don't remember, I would be coaching the hurting party to not overly trust their memories. Or not to say that something didn't happen, but maybe the wording wasn't the way. And by the way, I have tested myself, and my memory is unreliable when on hurting things. I had a friend of mine who had a background in psychology or counseling. He said, Steve, do verbatims whenever you find yourself in a conflict. I said, what's a verbatim? He says, write down what happened right when it happened. Keep a good record. And I have. I got a really good record of a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. I was an elder for 5 years, so I have a record of how I handle things. You know, it's really helpful. But what I've found out about myself is the way that I tell stories over and over and over again evolves the stories. And I borrow from other people's stories and put it in there, you know. So I would say I generate intentionally a mistrust and all the specifics, but not a mistrust of something that didn't happen. Things have happened and bad things have happened, but to assign way too much memory of the words that took place and expect the perpetrator to remember all the words they said. It's just now. One thing that does help is when you get them to at least say, well, can we look back? Is there some things we wish we would have done differently? And you make a list. And if you can get 5, that's great. Like when we did it in LA, we got 14. I was so happy with that. But if you get 5, and somebody will say, you know, I wish I would have gone to you when I first felt things. And I didn't. I went to somebody else. Or Proverbs 18:17. I listened to one side of the story and didn't get yours. That was not right. And so then you got a little 5-point thing that builds a little bit of trust, but it's not easy. Any other questions? Yes.
Forgiveness and reconciliation are two different things. In order to have reconciliation, both all parties involved have to be.
Right.
So if you speak to conflict resolution, forgiveness, apology, but all parties are unwilling to reconcile. I think sometimes our movement goal with reconciliation, I've come to the conclusion that may not be possible. Is that am I flawed in
No,
my thinking, or is that
I think this is fair for you I mean, what you said is correct. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to say it back in my words that forgiveness is one thing that we should all achieve for, even if it's just one of the 4 reasons. Okay, motivations. But reconciliation may not be possible even when there's forgiveness, and we have no right to pressure people into it. I'm handling a situation as a team member on something where 2 guys used to work together really, really, really tightly, and something went bad, and one party will not ever even be in the same room for a mediation. They go to the same church, they'll be in the same assembly, but will not try. And his reason is the mental illness of this other person becomes so aggressive in sessions that even to look at his eyes, and the people that I've talked to around the situation say, yeah, this guy's not well. So we can't control his life. That's what cults do, right? Like you have to. We're telling you. No, they can't. And there might be some need for special counseling on both sides, right? Like this guy might need that, but not from the standpoint of we got to say, you eventually have to sit down with the elders and work your stuff out. I just don't. Mental illness alone is a reason, no. Yes,
To add to that, I had a situation where somebody, the only time in my life I've ever asked somebody to leave my home, I did. There were other people and witnesses around. And because there were other witnesses around, they were told to apologize to me and another person. And informed me that I was to travel to them so that they could apologize to me. And I was like, well, no, I don't do that because it means you're not sorry. But years later, we met and they came up to me and were so apologetic and so sincere and had said at the time, I was like informing you that I was going to apologize to you, so you should travel across town to me. I was not apologetic. I was obeying my minister that I was being mentored by. And it just made me think like how, I would say untrained that minister was to inform him that he should apologize while not looking at his sincerity in the situation.
So Taylor brought up a situation where there was an infraction about she asked somebody to leave her apartment, which happened, but a minister wanted to, I'm going to use my language, play whack-a-mole or bop it to fix this thing by telling Taylor what she needed to do, telling this other person what he needed to do, and the perpetrator was not in a good place at that time. Later, years later, that man comes to apologize to Taylor. I don't think, and this is just not about our legacy of history of churches, I don't think most ministers have the training for this. You either get it through life experience and age and wisdom and pain and suffering, or you get it from training or a combination. But if a minister were to say, you guys get reconciled, say, yeah, on God's time, and so forth. So very good. Any other final questions? Yes, Mike.
So where do we go from here? I don't want this to be another workshop. If now we did nothing with this, what would you suggest our next step be?
Well, a couple different things. Good question, Mike. So we've started language here in this church based on the presentation. Presentation is not going to go away. More documents can be available. I have a workbook that goes along with this. And then you can point people that are not functioning well around conflict, say, hey, listen, go back and listen to that thing. We are making a commitment. The consulting report that I'll have for the church that will come out in August will have some recommendations how to shorten the timetables between when something goes wrong and to get something goes right. And this includes at the leadership level with elders and evangelists, but at the membership level. So rebirthing commitments at the beginning. I don't think you were in, Mike, were you here at the beginning? Yeah. Okay. So the story I told at the beginning, when Trish and I went into Chicago and took about a year to look at the situation, then came up with a covenant of Matthew 5 and Matthew 18, set up a team of 9 people that were skilled and helpful. Those kind of things can be done here. And then when the leadership shows that they mean business by steps that are taken, it has a cascading effect in the church. But what our role can be is to try to practice and memorialize the things that stuck out in your next conflict with your spouse, your friends, somebody in your small group, or even at work. So it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I would say the biggest help could be in this church is there'd be at least a dozen people that go to the next place. And I do have a workshop for mediation training as well. So we can talk about that at another time. Alrighty, thank you very much. It was great to be with you today.